So today I'm going to attempt to not just migrate, but completely clone and rebuild a 500-page website using Claude Code. So for context, this is Marketing Automation Insider. I built this in 2014. And due to some slightly ridiculous decisions overcomplicating the backend, I haven't been able to update this for about 3 years. So here's my plan. I've got access to the code base. I'm going to give that to Claude Code, tell it to rebuild the site, and that's kind of it. See if that works. So I've plopped the old code in here, and I've just told Claude Code, I've got this repo. I can access some things, can't access others. Can you rebuild this? So it's gone through the code base. It's had a little poke around, and oh, I've hit my limit. Right, I knew this day would come. We're doing it. We're upgrading to max. So there we go. We have got a bit more firepower. So let's go back into VS Code, say no excuses, crack on. Okay, so it's come back with a pretty detailed migration plan. I'm just going to go through this and make sense of what it is suggesting. Okay, interesting. So it's going to go to the current sitemap.xml file, scrape a list of all the URLs on the current website. Then it's going to write some Python scripts to scrape all the URLs for bits of data that it doesn't have in the code base. Then it's going to try and reassemble everything in markdown files with little JSON blocks for all the content. My gut feel is it'll probably get about 95% of the way there, and we'll have to wade our way through the last 5% with a lot of prompting. So before I auto accept this, one thing I'm going to do is tell it to save this plan, because at some point we're going to lose all of this context, and we don't want it to lose this kind of big picture plan. Okay, so I'm going to tell it to create a plans folder and save this plan in it, breaking it down into a separate markdown file for each feature or phase. So this just means that we can preserve this plan, and later on when we inevitably run out of context, we still retain that full picture of the entire plan. So recommend doing this. Otherwise, you just get to a point where it starts creating new features and going off the rails a bit. So while we wait for that to do its thing, I'll just show you around the site just to give you a bit of a scale of what we're trying to do. So this site is built programmatically. We've got lots of reviews like you can see here. Now where this site gets a little bit out of hand is we have lots of what we call versus pages, where we compare every permutation of different vendors. So if you're comparing ActiveCampaign versus Campaign Monitor, for example, we have every combination of page like this. So this is where it's going to be interesting, because in theory, you could just create a markdown file for each vendor and then have a script that creates like this template for every permutation. That's what I'm expecting it to do, but who knows whether it's actually going to do it. So this sitemap file kind of represents all the content that we're going to need to create. We've got lots of different templates. Obviously, those versus pages are the big one, but we've also got review pages, pricing pages. We've got lots of blog posts. So lots of stuff going on. I imagine some stuff it's going to build impressively well, and then other things it might just kind of miss off. But in theory, it has the actual code base, so there's kind of no excuses. Okay, so it's created all those planning files. So you can see now here, we've got a detailed planning file for all 6 phases. So phase 1, scraping, which it started doing. Phase 2, project setup. Then it's going to work on the data layer, creating a JSON file for each of the vendors. Then it's going to refactor the pages, get all the image assets, and then finally deploy. So I'm just going to let that work through, and we'll see where this ends up. So we've been going about 15 minutes, and we are already on phase 4 of the project. So it scraped the sitemap, got all the URLs, scraped all the data, which I can see here. So it's gone to every vendor, and we can see we've now got a JSON file with all the data for each vendor, which is insane. It's set up a new Astro project from the repo, and now built the local data layer. Okay, so the refactoring looks like it's done. While we wait for this to do its next thing, I will just touch on one thing, which is the Claude.md file. Now, if you've done anything in Claude Code before, you're probably already familiar with the Claude.md file. It's essentially a system prompt that tells Claude Code any important context or preferences, constraints that you want it to use. Now, this is one that I really like. I got this from Nick Sariev, and although it's quite long, it's very good because it encourages Claude Code to write deterministic code and to separate concerns. So this is why it's defaulted to building a bunch of Python scrapers to go and scrape the old website, rather than using the LLM to generate content and generate pages. So you can see we've included here to have this 3-layer architecture where we create directives. So we're writing documentation as we go. Similar to the planning thing I did earlier, this just makes it a little bit better at preserving context over time, because as you can see down here, we've used 89% of the context window. Generally, anything over about 70% is not ideal because you're going to use way more tokens. And also LLMs tend to get a lot worse when they get closer to their context window. So in a minute, we're going to need to fire up a new window or compact this conversation, which means that certain amounts of context are going to be lost. However, because we created those separate planning files and because we've got the directives folder with clear documentation of what everything is doing, we don't suffer as much when we get that loss of context. Layer 2 is the LLM, that's Claude Code doing all the thinking. And then layer 3 is all the tools. So these are all of our Python scripts in this execution folder. So you can see it's created separate scripts for scraping vendors, scraping the sitemap, downloading images, scraping metadata, etc. So when it needs to do something, it's going to create itself a tool rather than just kind of brute force and try to figure it out itself. So far, so good. This looks absolutely phenomenal, and I'm kind of terrified to look at how much usage this has already blown through on my Claude Code account. Where are we at? 1%. Okay, that is better than I was expecting. I was slightly terrified to see that I'd already blown through like 30% of my credits after upgrading 10 minutes ago. Okay, fair enough. So I'll leave that to run and probably come back, and in about 2 minutes time we'll be on phase 7. Okay, we're installing dependencies. It's just downloading Node, and I think it's about to attempt its first build. Now, this could be a complete waste of credits and it might look completely and be useless, but if this looks good, if this actually works, this is insanely impressive. It's been less than half an hour, and it's essentially saying that it's rebuilt a 500-page website. And from what I can see from the code, there's good reason to believe that this might have done a pretty good job. Let's see. All right, we're deploying. Okay, 46 seconds later, it's built the site. So on the right here, we've got the site that it's created, and then on the left, we've got the current live site. And as you can see, it's done a pretty phenomenal job. So if we go through just a couple of pages, we'll have a look what is similar and different. I mean, that's pretty phenomenal. Like, there are differences, like here, this is a 10, this is 4.5, but this is like a tricky game of spot the difference. Like, this is a really good first attempt. So it looks like we've got some issues with images. It looks like not all the screenshots have copied across. So it's a few little things like here, for example, where it's saying like undefined deliverability, but it's even so, it's still built the page perfectly. This is absolutely insane. I said at the start of this video, I think that, you know, I was expecting it to be like 95% of the way there, and like and I was have to kind of prompt our way through the last 5%. This is done like 99.9%. Like, there are a few small tweaks. Like, we need to get it to fix the screenshots, and there's a few little links, but I was not expecting it to be anywhere near this good. This has done such a good job, to the point where it's probably 10-15 minutes of tidying this up, and then we're ready to switch DNS over and use this. And there's a part of me which is like, if I was being cynical, I'd say, you know, why am I so impressed that this has effectively done a really good job of copy and pasting a website? But if you've ever done a website migration before, you know that it's never as simple as it seems, particularly situations like this where we've moved away from certain technologies. Like, this new version doesn't use GraphQL. We've detached from an entire CMS that we've randomly built, and yet it's stitched everything together perfectly. Also, this is 3 years out of date, so everything would have been on the wrong version and dependency hell, and yet it's just sorted it out. Now, I would say I'm a pretty low hype person, especially when it comes to AI tools, but this has genuinely really impressed me. Like, I think there's something about when seeing AI do something so effectively that you have previously done manually, and when you know the time, the complexity, the error rate, and to see it just breeze through it in like 20 minutes near perfectly is mind-boggling. So yeah, I hope this was useful and interesting. If you've got any questions, comments, or videos on Claude Code you'd like to see, let me know below. Otherwise, if you are diving into Claude Code, I'd recommend checking out this video that I made last week, where I talked through some of the foundations that you probably want to get in place first to make sure that you're building things that you actually keep and add value, and not just a bunch of automations that you turn off 3 days later. Hope that's been useful. See you in the next video.